Hello, Internet. Happy Sunday. Believe it or not, this is the second time I've already done this. I just started the stream and just forgot to go live, and we talked for like 30 seconds before this even started because I'm a moron. Happy to see everybody. I was wondering why there's nobody in the chat. We got a very special episode tonight. We got Palace and Samuel from Gays Against Groomers, California, and they got a lot of questions to ask. Lots of stuff about grooming California kids in the school system, the weaponization of the court systems against the family unit, against kids, crazy Scott Weiner, Gavin Newsom signing insidious bills, all that good stuff. But yeah, enough of me blabbering. Let's go ahead and bring in Samuel and Palace. Samuel, Palace, how we number two? Try number two. How we doing?
Great.
Samuel, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll start off with Palace. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started with Gays Against Groomers, and what Gays Against Groomers is?
Well, I should probably start with Gays Against Groomers. So Gays Against Groomers is a nonprofit of gays and then others in the community that are adamantly against the indoctrination, the sterilization, and the mutilization of children, all under the umbrella of LGBTQIA+, blah, blah, blah. And nobody can really keep track of what goes on after the T, I think, these days.
Justin Trudeau does. He's on it.
He is really good at that, surprisingly, because I see him in and I can't even keep track, but bless his heart, he knows the acronym and stuff right after that. So yeah, so we pretty much what we do is go to school boards and tell them that, hey, this is incredibly inappropriate to be indoctrinating children under the guise of LGBT, and here's why. We're always backed up with statistics and facts. We try to leave emotion out of the equation. We talk to legislators. We go to festivals to speak on panels, all sorts of good stuff. But it's important that the community start speaking up about these things, because the majority of gay people don't agree with this. And we're reaching a point where we need to be very adamant, because it seems like California is really stepping on the gas pedal when it comes to gender affirming care for kids. It's not really care. It's more like child abuse. So, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so I am the director of media for Gays Against Groomers. I'm also the California co-chapter leader along with Samuel, and I'll leave this on to you, Sammy.
So I'm Samuel. I go by Sammy in the org. It's been the nickname that I've had since Jump. And same, yeah, I mean, we're all over California, even pop out of California, head over to other states, wherever we're needed, wherever we can be, up in Sacramento when everything was going down, to show support there. I just got into the org because I had no gay friends. Like it's hard to have gay friends in, this environment that we're in with the alphabet mob. So I just thought my ideas were kind of my own. And I came across Jamie, our founder, and what she was talking about. I was like, who is this chick like slaying the game here? And so I just looked into it, and it's wild because once I joined, I mean, everybody, like, again, we're gay, lesbian, bi, trans, others in the community, all walks of life, background, religion, and immediately these friendships were fortified, solidified, and it's been a great experience.
A little bit about what Palace said about how the majority of gays in the community are against all of this alphabet mafia stuff, and I love that you call it that too. Like, I was sort of nervous I have a very close gay friend. His name's Mark, and he actually didn't come out of the closet until he was like 40 something. And he was married to a very abusive wife, and she ended up passing away actually, and he became a widower. And after, he decided to like start going to the gym and come out of the closet. And now he's all jacked and he's happier than he's ever been. And, it's still the same old Mark. Mark's always been like a Tennessee sort of dork, but I was scared to like have this conversation with him because I didn't know what his stance was going to be on it. And no, he's right on board with like everything that I'm saying. And it's funny because the people that are so loud about just grooming, the grooming of kids and the jamming the trans agenda stuff down everyone's throat, they really are the minority, it seems.
100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, they do have the ear of the mainstream media, and essentially they are the mainstream media on all accounts, but it is a small majority. And when you start talking to your friends, your family about these issues, a lot of them don't have any kind of clarity when it comes to gender affirming care. Some of them, like, it doesn't affect them, so it's out of sight, out of mind. But once you start having these conversations with them, they're usually like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I had no idea." And so that's really initially how we're going to win this war on children, is by having these kind of conversations. It may be difficult, but it's necessary in the long term.
Yeah, and a lot of them too. So the ones that are loud, sadly, they're either one, they're misinformed, or the other part of it, which it was sad, is that they're just puppets for the mainstream media, for these politicians, speaking out against what should be their own community on these issues. And back to what you were saying about how you find it, you were worried about having this conversation with your buddy. That's what we hear from a lot of people, and it's because the media tells us, that we shouldn't have these conversations. And I always tell anyone, anytime that comes up, I say, have these conversations. We're talking about safeguarding children. So if you can't be afraid to have conversations when it's surrounding the material that we're discussing here today. Which is why I had no friends before Gays Against Groomers.
Well, hopefully you have lots of friends now. And it's so insidious because of how much money's behind it. And then when you follow the money, as they say, and you realize that this is like a lobby group, and they with the trans kids agenda thing, you soon realize that, oh, they're trying to create clients for life. And it's really sick. And especially with what we went through after COVID, especially with, like, I was just talking about this, with the whole attack on like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and then the doctors that were going to prescribe it. It's like, these are safe medications that are FDA approved, and these are doctors. These are trained professional doctors, and they're being attacked relentlessly, and it doesn't make sense. And this is very similar with this is gender affirming care and trans kids' rights and all this. Is like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem organic. This is strange. What is really going on here?
Well, when you zoom out, because, we're just talking for the United States, for instance, but when you zoom out to other countries, so there's 4 countries as of now that have flat out banned gender affirming care for minors, full stop, period. So United Kingdom was the most recent one, but then there's Belgium, there's Sweden, and there's Finland. The reason why they've banned it is that they have come to the conclusion that it is irreversible harm to children. This is the biggest child abuse scandal the world has ever seen. And yet here in the United States, and also in Canada, mind you, they're still going full steam ahead. And I think you nailed it right on the head. There's a very, very lucrative trans lobby connected to all of this. And so when we plug it back into California, there's a trifecta that's happening here. You have the trans lobby that's working in tandem with the California legislators that are also working in tandem with the California Teachers Associations. So you have the teachers unions. So it's the trifecta that we're dealing here in California. And it's also Colorado too. Colorado has it as well. Other states they have this kind of same battle that we have, but California in particular, we need to nip this in the butt as soon as humanly possible. And it's a shame that we've come to this sad conclusion thus far, and it's going to end eventually. It just comes down to, what is the body count out of this? Right. And it's I think maybe Sam could probably speak more of this, but yeah.
Well, no, just to go back to what you're saying about what's driving it, and in our book, The Gender Trap, Chapter 7, discusses this in great detail about the medical establishment, as well as, in addition to how that's happening. And you look at this kind of like globally, and it's, upwards to like a $200 billion a year industry. And so when you think of that in the billions, you're like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense now. And like you mentioned earlier, and I agree with you, it's driven by a machine. And what is that machine? It's the medical establishment, big pharma, and there's money there. And they goes into great detail in that chapter about all this. So it's absolutely driven by money. And then, of course, to the power, I believe, of indoctrinating children young. If you can pull them away from their family and they stand for nothing, they belong to no one, then they're easier to control as they get older. And then you just have, this communist country.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Paz.
No, because I was just thinking, because I was looking at that statistic of like how much money does California spend on education just in general? It's like 128 billion as of last year. And so based on that statistic, K-12 education in particular, 1/3 of California students, they're not as proficient in math, and about half of them are not as proficient in English. So 128 billion, like where is that money going into? It's going into indoctrinating children into gender affirming care. And so it's the crazy train. That's really what that is. It's the crazy train.
Yeah, I saw a 8th grade test from 100 years ago the other day. Just looking at it, it was just like a general test on reading, writing, arithmetic. I can't pass this test. Our public education system has done us a very serious disservice. But there's so many different dynamics to this whole thing, because there's the family unit part, there's the pushing this stuff on children's part, there's the medical aspect of it, and then there's sports, and that's really my where it started hitting home with me. I'm a cross country coach. I coach Little League. I played sports all my life. I'm a runner. And this idea that there's no difference between men and women that's trying to be jammed down everybody's throat, when, I mean, I think it's got to be like 95 to 99% of people that are like, wait, what? Like, what are you saying? There's no difference between men. Like, we just saw the Olympics thing. Actually, I do want to talk to you about this, because I think that's a whole different thing. The boxing thing, I don't think that was a trans issue. I think we actually had the very small percentage of a hermaphrodite or hermaphroditic person, but that's a different conversation. But the idea that, especially with combat sports, that you can just say, yeah, I'm a woman now, and compete against women in any sport. I mean, it's not just competing on the all the focus is on is the competition, but what about the locker rooms and the bathrooms and spaces that, I hate to use their language, the safe spaces, but the spaces that are designed to keep women safe? It's like feminism has gone and done this whole thing to where now feminism is attacking women. It's
well,
insane.
I want to point out the feminism part, because I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And the thing about the feminism part is that what you have when it comes to the trans agenda, when it's plugged into feminism, is that you have this particular echelon, this upper elite class of women that are typically, I don't want to say that they're typically white women, but they're women that don't have to deal with the same kind of problems that minority women have to deal with. In particular, minority women are much more, in terms of like women's prisons, like, there's a ratio between, white women and the minority-based women. Minority-based women, like, they have to deal with the real ramifications of transgendered policies. They're sexually assaulted in prisons because of these kind of policies that are enacted. Going back to the girls in sports thing, it's remarkable that as of this week, Title IX was struck down. The revision to Title IX by the Biden administration, that was struck down to, I think it was like 5-4 by the Supreme Court. But Title IX was essentially just 50 words, and it was just based on protecting girls' sports. With that new revision, it would have been 1,500 pages defining what a woman is, but then also the transgender protections on top of that. 1,500 pages to, compared to the 50 words, less than 50 words of Title IX. So that tells you all you need to know about the shenanigans that are unfolding right in front of us. It's all just garbage, and it has real life detrimental effects, in particular to girls in locker rooms and sports, and having opportunities stripped from them because of these kind of policies. It's disgusting.
I agree, and it's very disgusting. And the reality that we're having these conversations as grown people, mature adults, men. It's embarrassing that this is what's happening in our nation. And, we talk a lot in some of our other podcasts or in our own, groups about, like, where are these fathers at? If I had children and my daughter was in a school, not only would I work 2 or 3 jobs to homeschool her and make it work, but I would be in that school pulling my daughter out immediately and making a very big scene where, it's wild to me that these parents are, not all of them, of course, we know a lot of them are out here fighting the good fight, but the fact that it's actually happening shocks me. It really is. It's shocking. I can't imagine having a child and them being exposed to this bullshit.
It's the last 4 years. There's so many things that are just shocking. I mean, go back to, 2019. and just look how different the world is now. You know, it's just,
and it's so weird because it goes against every instinct. I mean, as a man, you have this instinct to protect, especially vulnerable young people and girls, and it's crazy to me that there are so many men, within the school districts and working in the schools, and all these fathers, I mean, and this is happening. That's one thing that I often get lost in thought, just wondering how did we even get here? And where are these parents at? Where are these fathers at?
Something
we
that
go-
something that, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there, Michael.
No,
It
you're
was
good.
something I'm glad that Sammy said that, because it was something that someone brought up to me when I was at this festival in England last week. It's the whole divide and conquer strategy, because a lot of people typically, they, if it's not, out of sight, out of mind, if it's not a problem that's personally affecting me, I don't care about it, I don't want to know about it. Well, that's the whole strategy of divide and conquer. You take this certain subsect of people, and maybe that doesn't, maybe that's not something that you have to deal with, but it's eventually going to come to you, and all these other people were divided and conquered, and then now it's up to you, and then there's nobody there to help you defend your home, your stance. And so I thought that was a very interesting, like, oh yeah, that's actually right. Like, this is how the strategy is. You take one subsect of people, you really rattle the cage and create chaos, and then you go from one subsect of people to another subsect of people. It's a disturbing thing that we have to face nowadays, but I think that the more that people speak up about these things, and the more that other people see the courage, other people are going to feel emboldened to be that kind of courageous. And so that's something that brings us hope at Gays Against Groomers.
100%. And I mean, all it does is take one person to stand up. But Sammy says, where are all the men? Where are all the fathers? And I think a lot of this comes back down to the attack on boys, the attack on masculinity. And people have just been browbeaten to the point where they deny their own instincts. They deny their own protective instincts and think that there's something wrong with them for, they must be transphobic, or they must be, something, whatever. And they don't want to be attacked and all that. But like you just said, as soon as one person starts standing up, it's like, oh, somebody else feels this way too. And then everybody starts standing up. And
yeah, and your viewers should know too that those things like transphobic and homophobic, those are just red herrings. Those are distraction that they throw out there to scare people about speaking up. Nobody's homophobic and transphobic. Nobody's terrified that gay people are coming in. I mean, this is 2024. Come on, just knock off the bullshit. That is such a like I said, it's such a red herring. It's such a distraction, and people should feel empowered to say, no, I'm not even going to accept that. We're not even going to acknowledge a ridiculous remark, or even back it up with, well, no, I'm not. I have a gay friend, or I have a gay son, or I have a gay brother. Right. No, you don't need any of that to not, we always say that a person based off of their lifestyle. Like, I know whether or not you're good with gay people. And even if you're not, it doesn't have to be a problem because you're not, coming at me. So my point is the whole transphobic, homophobic stuff. Don't let that scare people. You shouldn't even listen to it. You should just walk right past that and keep on going with whatever talking point you had, because it's all that is a distraction.
I wanted to add to that too as well. Nobody cares that you're trans or you're gay or whatever. It only matters when you direct it towards children. That's the characteristic. And with Gays Against Groomers, see, a lot of people, they like to criticize our organization, and they'd like to accuse us of being transphobic or anti-LGBT. And I don't know how that can be, considering that Sammy's gay and I'm a lesbian. So how can we be, how can we hate ourselves? That doesn't make any sense. But our mission has been very laser focused, and it's been very narrow and very specific for a reason. We're just here to protect kids. We don't care about what trans adults do in their personal lives, what the homosexuals do in their personal lives. It doesn't matter. It does matter when you try to direct it towards children. We have a major problem with that. And so the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, GLAAD, Human Rights Campaign, there's a whole bunch of organizations that are they hate us. They hate us because
evil.
GLAAD.
Yeah.
We break the narrative.
We're written as a far right, wing organization
Right.
that are made up of all paid people who are really straight, and it's so silly, the things that they do, even to try to even distract us. But I'm so glad Palace made that point, because it's true. This is not those distractions that they send out about us being transphobic ourselves. It's silly. If you're an adult, do you? If it is legal and it's yourself or with another consenting adult, nobody gives a crap. No, again, we're in 2024. Nobody cares. It's when you start coming for children, and not only children, but other people's children. That's when we have a problem, and we will never make peace with people who try to do that.
Never make peace. We will never make peace with people that go after kids, particularly Scott Weiner with his legislation. So.
And that name, I mean, God, that's
everything about him. That's why,
geez, like,
there's a reason I chose him for the thumbnail, and it's so strange how he seems to be the author of all these bills that we'll get into in a minute. But especially here in California, I mean, you can't be homophobic here in California, especially if you're in the Bay Area, and it's ridiculous when they start to try to smear people in that way, especially here in California. And what it does is it makes people start to, if anything, it is actually contributing to transphobia or homophobia, and it's making people think, well, maybe there is something to, it makes people start overanalyzing things and thinking that, all trans people or all gays are a certain kind of way. And that's one of the, that's what we're pushing back to as well, because we're at risk now, I feel, more than we have been in a long time, decade plus or even more, because people, they're doing this under the guise of the, LGBT mafia, umbrella. And so people, if I was a straight man and I had kids in school and I was hearing all this, I would also be like, wait a minute, aren't you the problem? You're the gay people. You're the one. No, it's not us at all. And like we talked about earlier when we first started, that a lot of the gay community isn't for this, but they're using us because our community has been hijacked. And now we're actually getting a lot of pushback, and we're starting to experience dislike again because people think that we're coming for their children. And rightfully so. I mean, if I thought that, I'd be upset too. The San Francisco Gay Choir or whatever wrote a whole song about it. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Literally,
they totally did. Yeah.
Literally the lyrics saying we are coming for your children.
Yeah. It's insane.
I mean, how creepy is that? Like,
super creepy.
Well, Scott Weiner too, as well. And I want to point out San Francisco Pride, because this was something he said at the kickoff of San Francisco Pride, which he said, we'll always be here for those children. I'm paraphrasing here. Those are our children. So right away, we have a real problem with our legislators, in particular, the California LGBTQ caucus, which Senator Scott Weiner is a part of. They have this notion that these kids are their kids. And we want to make that distinction clear that we at Gays Against Groomers, we work with parent groups. We work with other allies within the community that are fighting for parental rights. Because what Scott Weiner is saying is erroneously incorrect. These are not our kids. These kids have parents, and these parents are fighting for their rights. They have rights under the Constitution and laws of this land. So, absolutely disturbing.
Yeah, and I mean, on that note, I should give a shout out to Tracy Henderson with the California Parents Union. I don't know if you're aware, they go up against the teachers unions, and they're probably the biggest organization fighting for parental rights in California right now. But the legislative attack on kids and the family unit, I want to get into that a little bit because, before you talked about the prison system earlier, so I want to just jump to that first. I had that like 5 things down, but many people don't realize that they passed a bill saying that biological men, if they say that they identify as women, they get put in women's prisons. And there's been rapes, there's been pregnancies, and it's insane. It's absolutely insane. That's SB 132 is a California state bill that aims to ensure the safety and dignity of transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex individuals while incarcerated. The bill, also known as the Transgender Respect Agency and Dignity Act, was passed in 2023, and it requires the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to house individuals according to their gender identity as perceived by the individual. So me, if I get busted, I don't even want to associate myself with this, but say a guy my size, I'm 6'6", 240. Guy my size rapes a woman. heterosexual male rapes a woman, gets busted and says, oh, well, I identify as a female. They have to put him in a women's prison. A 6'6'2". Yeah.
Yeah. And it's our understanding that it's as simple as that. They're not going through a proper screening from a psychiatrist. They're not being placed on any program to see whether or not how long they're going to, continue this idea in their head that they're now trans. It's just as quickly as I identify as this, okay, let's get the paperwork going, to our understanding. And that is very, very alarming. And women are being put at risk.
I also wanted to mention, because it is outside of our scope at Gays Against Groomers, because we deal specifically with the kids, but it's important to mention here in this instance, this is just another example of legislation that's passed in California that is on the wrong side of history. It's completely backwards in its initial, the idea that men can be housed in women's prisons. A lot of these women suffer from PTSD, from assault, sexual assault. And this idea that this is totally allowed, it's totally acceptable, it just comes to show that this is just one example of many different examples of pieces of legislation that many people don't agree with, and it's unfortunate that we've come to this conclusion, but sometimes we have to reach the precipice in order for things to change. And I think that we are at this precipice. The more that it gets introduced towards kids and it's directed towards kids, because it's really, really alarming what's happening in California.
Yeah. And if there is a nexus, it's just that these institutions, whether it's prison or school, are blurring the lines, allowing, the opposite sex to be in spaces that are not designated for them. They're not designed for them, with, like you said early on, with boys being in girls' locker rooms.
Right. And I know it's outside of your scope, the whole prison thing, but there really is this obfuscation of, everybody's lumped under the trans umbrella. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the term autogynephilia. And this is a thing where straight men like to dress up as women and they get off on it. They get sexually aroused on it. And these men are taking advantage of the situation, and with the whole Planet Fitness thing that's going on right now, where men are just saying, I'm dressed like a woman, big old burly dudes, and they're just going into the locker rooms, and it's you don't see men being threatened by biological women saying I identify as a man, because they're not going to come in and dominate them in sports. They're not a threat to us in the locker room. It might be a little awkward, but it's not a threat to us. It's not a threat to our physical safety. And that is something that just seems to be not talked about at all. Is this only goes in one direction. So obviously there's an attack on kids, but this is an attack on women, and it's insidious.
Well, I got to tell you, the spa that I go to, because I'm in Los Angeles County, and the spa that I go to is a Korean spa that's based in downtown LA. It's called We Spa, and there was a big piece of news. Yeah, it's a Korean spa. It's a very well-known Korean spa. There? I go there because it is it's a generational spa where, outside of the news that came out, that spa is of particular interest to the Korean community, because grandmothers go there, mothers go there, daughters go there. So it's a generational thing when you go to that spa. It's a very authentic Korean spa. So long story short, I believe this was a year or two ago, there was a transgendered woman, went to the spa, went to the basement level of the women's spa where it's located, had a full-on erection, because in the spa, it's a very sacred space. First off, when you go to spas like that, in particular Korean spas, it's a very sacred space. It's a very female designated space. So when you have somebody there that is not a female, a biological female, this guy had an erection there, and there's little girls with their moms and their grandmothers going to the spa. Turns out this particular male was a sex offender. Yeah. It came out eventually. And it's just one other example that female spaces, they don't exist in 2024, in particular in Los Angeles. But yeah, I instantly thought of that as soon as you started talking about this particular subject.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and we can pivot, in a moment here, but let me just piggyback on that. Again, this is what I was saying earlier about how they're indoctrinating these children early so that they can normalize this sort of stuff later on. If you're a child who grows up in a school system where boys can be in your locker room and, can be in your showers and, can identify, then when you're a grown woman, and these are all young women in the making, and you're a grown woman, then you don't you don't know anymore or you haven't been taught that you do have a right to privacy. You do have a right to these safe spaces because you've been indoctrinated early on in your school system. So now you find yourself in these situations as an adult. So, it does have, there is a connection. I know, like Palace said, like it's a little more out of our scope in terms of the adult stuff, but there are connections to it for sure. And it's showing a pattern and what they're hoping to do, just make it normal.
Well, that woman at Wiesbaugh, she had her child with her, and that's why this is such a big issue, because then it crosses over that line into the pedophilic stuff. And the whole being against grooming of children, it's not just grooming of children in terms of the trans agenda and making kids confused about their gender and all of that. The whole Epstein thing, like that was heterosexual grooming. That's not okay either. The whole
that we know of, that we know
right,
of.
Right. And it's, like you see a lot of these old videos. I mean, the one that pops into my brain is Demi Moore, when I don't know what kid it was, but she's like kissing a kid that's like 14 or 15. And like what happened to Bieber, this is grooming. It's putting, and this is particularly talking about young boys, but it's like and boys aren't going to speak out against it because they feel like, I'm supposed to be attracted to older women, and, like young men don't think that, like, you could be raped too. Like if you don't want to do it, this is all of this stuff is grooming. And I'm sure your organization would agree. We're against all of it. It's not okay. Like when I was a kid, and it makes me feel old when I say this, but it's like back in my day, but when I was in like 5th, 6th grade or whatever, my parents had to sign a permission slip for our teacher to talk to us about sex ed. And all they talked about was the anatomy, like how reproduction works and stuff. There was no talk about gender. It was all just like how the body works. And our parents had to sign a permission slip for that. Now you've got these insane books that are showing kids how to give blowjobs, and it's freaking madness. I don't have kids. My best friend pulled his kid out of school. He doesn't have daughters, but he pulled his son out of school because he's like, my son's kind of like sensitive and might be like borderline. Like his son's kind of effeminate, and he's like, if my kid turns out to be gay, he's like, fine, whatever, no problem. But I don't want like these crazy teachers trying to say, oh, well, you might be a girl. He ended up pulling his kid out of school. He's doing homeschool. It's called Free Life or something. It's great. But
yeah, well, and we have these ideas too in Gays Against Groomers, about stop erasing the tomboys and stop erasing the gay boys. Like we're not even going to be able to exist if this is allowed to continue on the level that it's happening and the severity that it's happening, because like you said, a kid is a little effeminate, and there was a time that everybody in the family may have thought, Sammy's probably going to grow up a little gay, he's a little feminine on this or that or the other. And now these kids are being, there's an intervention happening with people outside of their family that are saying, well, you're really feminine. Do you think you might be a girl? Like maybe you were born in the wrong body. You tell that to a kid who wants to make sense of something that he already feels a little ostracized about. I mean, it's just natural when you know something is different. When, Palace and I growing up gay, we knew something was different really early on. I before I even knew what gay was, I knew I was not like other boys. And had somebody intervened and told me something that would have brought me a little comfort maybe at the time, because I'm so naive and unaware of things. And that's what's happening. They're intentionally intervening with these children, knowing that they're easily manipulated because they don't understand.
Just take these pills, little Sammy, and it'll stop you from going through puberty, because that's really what's there's no coming back if you go through puberty. So yeah, you easily could have been convinced to just take these drugs.
Yeah, there's also because as you were talking, I instantly thought of Carlos down in Southern California about the My Shadow is Pink book. I don't know if you've heard this story, Michael. This particular father was driving his kid to practice, and so he asked his son, I believe he was in 5th grade at the time, how was your day? What's been going on? And his kid was uncomfortable because of what had initially happened at school. By the way, just full disclosure, like there was no parental script signed for this particular circumstance. what ended up happening was that his 5th grade son had to read My Shadow is Pink and then go to his buddy who's I think they had like a shadow buddy. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's like when you're in 5th grade, you shadow buddy a kindergartner student. So you shadow them in school and do all that stuff. It's just part of the process of elementary school. So, he reads this book and then he has to go to the kindergarten class and to his buddy and read the book to him and like share all of these things about My Shadow is Pink. And so had Carlos not asked his kid, how was your day? He would have not known this conversation or any of these things had transpired. What ended up happening out of that was the massive school board meeting took place where I think Sammy was there. It was like hundreds of parents coming to the school board. They were deeply, deeply upset because there was no parental notification. There was nothing. It was all under the guise of secrecy. So that was very disturbing to find out.
Was this over in Glendale?
No.
No.
Down in Encinitas area.
Oh,
so, and this is what, again, for your listeners, that if you don't think that it might be at your child's school, your nephew's school, take a look, peep in. You can ask at any time as a parent, for a record of what's going on with your child, what they're being taught that semester or that week even. And this is what brought this whole thing in Encinitas to a head, was that not only were the parents not informed, but their little blurb for the week, this was intentionally left out. And then what this gentleman, the father, who's a good man, he wasn't even like, he didn't even really know what the book was. What triggered him was his son felt so uncomfortable. And he was like, pretty much like, bro, what is going on? You're not being yourself. And he was just like, Dad, I had to read this book that I felt really uncomfortable. I mean, it was coming from the kid,
That's
and how uncomfortable he felt because he had built this, like Pal was saying, it's like a buddy system, a mentor. And
this is
had
abuse.
known this.
That's the definition of grooming.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so he's reading to this, kindergartner, and imagine this kid is feeling so wrong about this, but he's afraid to say anything because he knows the teachers will be like, no, this is the assignment, and it was only through his own feeling uncomfortable that Dad was tapping in like, hey, something's not right here. And then as it unraveled, his dad was like, whoa, this is not appropriate. And again, nothing against gay people, nothing against trans people. This is not okay in schools.
It's a sexual thing so a lot of people don't even know what grooming is. I want to talk about AB 1955 in a minute, because that's like right under the umbrella of what we're talking about right now. But a lot of people don't know what grooming is. And grooming, and jump in, correct me, cut me off if I'm not saying this right. But from my understanding, what grooming is when adults, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual material or trans material, they slowly introduce little bits of it to them to get them sort of acclimated with the idea that it's okay to have these sexual discussions with adults. And that's what it is it's grooming. It's slowly, incrementally getting kids comfortable with talking about things that their brain isn't developed enough to grasp.
And we're very careful about that word. We don't just throw it around. It has a lot of meaning to it, and it can't be misused because it could ruin somebody's reputation. So we're very careful about that word. But what's a little more broad is more of the grooming behavior. And that's what sometimes we find when people kind of wake up to this, they don't realize that it's not that they're doing the grooming, but they're exhibiting like groomer-like behavior. And for example, these teachers who are following this curriculum and this being trained to encourage students to not talk to their parents about things, they have now entered into groomer-like behavior. Now, the teacher is perfectly probably innocent. In a lot of cases, we find out these are good people. And they don't realize until it's brought to them that way that, yeah, this is, because that's what groomers do. Part of their whole training with children is, hey, I can be your friend. You can talk to me about this. Mom and dad don't need to know that, or grandma and grandpa, whoever the guardians are, they don't need to know this. And this is between us. That's when alarm bells should be going off for parents, teachers, everybody who are involved, with these children, that when you start talking to them about not telling mom and dad something, that is not okay. Something is very wrong. Red alarms, run, turn around, run, tell your parents. Is what parents should be teaching their kids. If you're ever told that, that's when you need to tell me.
And that's that's the reason why AB 1955, that particular piece of legislation, is a very dangerous precedent. I mean, it was enough to get Elon Musk to move all the companies
Right.
out of California to Texas. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So initially, for those that don't know what AB 1955 is, it's a piece of legislation that aims to ban school districts from notifying parents of any kind of anything that's going on with their kids in relation to changing name, changing their pronoun, changing their gender. It's something that is a high point of contention because more Californians are waking up and realizing, oh my gosh, this is actually quite alarming. And the good news out of all of this is that there is pushback on this. Liberty Justice
Huge.
Center. Liberty
Huge.
Justice Center filed a lawsuit to challenge this. I know Aaron Friday is also another lawyer that's also combating this too as well. But this is something that if there is a hill, this is the hill, and we're
Right.
fighting it here in California.
Yeah. So this bill, and this is what people listening, whether here in other states, this is why California, is so important, is because this is, what gets tossed then into other states and starts to spill over. And this was a gut and amend bill, which means it was passed before either side of the House had a chance to read what was in it. And so then all the legislation or all the writing that went into it, nobody had even had a chance to read it. It had already been passed. And so then come to find out, here we are, and it's literally giving the green light, for this keeping secrets from parents, whether a kid is socially transitioning, identifying as this or that. We don't have to tell the parent. And then they argue that it's a right of privacy. First of all, the AB 1955 is unconstitutional because under the 14th Amendment, parents are the legal guardians are the first all end all be all. That's what they have say over their children, period. Dead the issue. So it's unconstitutional. And then also there's the part of it where the school districts are saying like, oh, well, no, what about harming children? And we're protecting children from being harmed by their parents. Again, I call bullshit because, if you know the school system, these teachers, all the faculty are, including janitors, they're trained to be what is called mandated reporters, if people don't know what that means. And yeah, so if you think that a child is going to go home and be mistreated.
What is a mandated reporter, really quick? Just say.
So that if they suspect any type of abuse, they have to report it to the appropriate authorities. Whether that be CPS, the police department, if it's, obvious abuse or there's, firsthand witness of it. So mandated reporter, if you think a child is in any kind of real danger, you have to report it. And you're legally bound to that. Teachers and faculty will get in trouble if it was found that they knew something and this children was still being harmed after the child had said something. So these teachers are already mandated reporter. Everybody in the school is. So this idea of, well, we don't want children to be hurt. If you thought a child is being harmed or will be harmed because they're going to go home and say, hey, I'm, Sammy, but I really kind of identify as Samantha. And you truly think that child's going to be abused or ostracized or kicked out, you call and you report that, and then the proper authorities will go in and do a proper investigation and see whether or not that child really is in danger. And so what AB 1955 is also doing is it's violating state and federal law that people are innocent until proven guilty. We're saying that all of these parents are guilty, of mistreating their children, ostracizing them, kicking them out, abusing them before we have any proof that that's even true. It's absolute. It's wild, man. Like crazy.
It could be argued that social transitioning, that has long-term psychological effects. Most kids end up growing out of this. So it could be argued that itself is child abuse. It's emotional, psychological abuse. So if a teacher were to find out this parent is dressing their son up in dresses and calling Billy Susie, it could be argued that teacher has discovered abuse from the parent and they are a mandated reporter to report it. And the exact opposite's happening. They're the ones doing the psychological abuse. Well, hey, maybe you might actually be a girl. Maybe you should go into the closet, change into this dress, and I'll call you whatever new name you want to have, and we'll keep it as a secret from your parents. It's insane.
And these teachers, or the faculty, they're qualified to a certain degree. I mean, these, CPS and other organizations are designed, they're taught, they're trained, very, very carefully on what to look for. And they don't always get it right. I mean, but that's why they exist. So to suggest that, certain teachers have the credentials to make their own assessment and say, well, I think, Sammy's parents are going to be upset with him and hurt him in any kind of way, emotional, physically, or otherwise. We're just going to keep the secret. So you're allowing the child to go home to an environment that may be dangerous to them, and you're deciding, you know, as the judge, that I'm making this decision. We're keeping the secret from the parent. It's absolutely crazy. You know, they don't have the credentials or the power to do that.
Agreeing with Sammy here. The other insidious thing about this too, as well, is that once a kid starts to transition, you know, that's being kept secret from the parents. So statistically, when they transition, do the social transition, because the social transition is a huge part of changing into their new identity, what ends up happening is that upwards of over 90% of those kids end up going on puberty blockers, ended up going through the whole process of transitioning. Right. So it's insidious that AB 1955 passed here in California. I also wanted to point out too, as well, because I was at the Capitol when it was at committee, you know, in the education committee, and they were going back and forth. Assemblyman Chris Ward, I remember he was pulling up all of these statistics and points. And I remember Aaron Friday was coming up and contradicting him every step of the way. What ended up happening with this particular piece of legislation, how it ended up manifesting through committee, was also very, very alarming too, as well, because as Sammy mentioned, it's a gut and amend bill. So they took an entirely different bill, they gut it, they revised the verbiage to be about the Safety Act and protecting kids and all of this stuff. And so it didn't,
Friday night.
Yeah,
they got 72 hours. Right.
Exactly. So it goes through this process that's not a particularly normal legislative process. So parent organizations, our organization, we had less than 48 hours to come up with a letter to go against this particular bill. And then I remember, because it was Memorial Day weekend, Memorial Day happened Monday, and then on that Tuesday morning was the hearing, the education hearing. And so I ended up flying up to Sacramento, flying up in that morning. I remember taking the Uber right from, as soon as I landed at the airport, going right into Sacramento to the swing spaces and going into this. Everything about it was inorganic. It wasn't natural. It was very outside of the realm of the normal legislative process. And that is how this bill ended up passing. They're doing things that are not, they're not playing by the book. They're not playing fair. And so the California LGBTQ caucus, we have a lot of questions that don't have a lot of answers. And so it's just really alarming how they've taken over the Capitol and started implementing all of these policies and then coming up with all of these crazy legislation to pass it through California. Because if it passes in California, the rest of the country is really at stake here. And people that think, by the way, if you're in a red state and you're thinking, oh, well, this can't happen to me. Well, if your kid runs away from your red state, all they need to do is get to California. And our legislators here have written legislation that protects them from you, essentially. And it's really heinous. It's extremely heinous.
Yeah, we're a sanctuary state, and bills like AB 665 that allows a child to run away at the age of 12 can find shelter if they say, and again, parents are presumed guilty, you know, at first, versus, you know, how it should be. And these children can be put into a residential home. The parent will not be notified of not only what their location is, but what's happening. Are they now going to start transitioning? It's very scary. So yeah, like Palace said, first of all, it is happening everywhere. Palace flew out to rural Ohio, you know, and combated a crazy school board there. So, you know, it's definitely can happen everywhere, will happen if this kind of stuff like AB 1955 is allowed to stand, which I don't think it will. I think just on the constitutional part of it, it'll be overturned. But as Palace mentioned earlier, the question that we have to ask ourselves, since this has been signed into laws, I'm sure it'll probably be overturned. It's unconstitutional, but how many families will be torn apart? How many children will be lost until that happens? And, you know, and that should be something that really does, you know, keep people up at night. These are children and families, and innocent families.
But you're touching on the really insidious nature of all this stuff. And that's how these bills work to complement one another. And these aren't just one-off bills. That's what people see, is the one-off bills. And, you know, like, everybody is paying super close attention to this 1955 bill, which they should, but they don't understand how it's complemented by AB 665. And you've already gone over 1955 and you explained pretty much what it is, so I won't read what that bill is. But this bill, this isn't the actual text, but use Brave browser. Their AI is fantastic. They sum up things for you. So AB 665 is signed into law by Governor Newsom on October 7th, 2023, aims to increase equitable, there's that word again, equitable, that commie gobbledygook word, equitable access to mental health care for low-income youth in California. The bill modifies existing laws to allow minors age 12 and older insured by Medi-Cal to consent to outpatient mental health treatment or counseling services without parental approval. So, like, really break down what that's saying. Outpatient, meaning they can take this kid without consulting the parents. They can take this kid out of school. A counselor can be like, you know what? I think you're going through something funny. We're going to pull you out of class, and we're actually going to let you go to this shrink over here, this psychologist, and talk about it. That opens the road to the puberty blockers thing, the right to gender affirming care. They all work together. It's insidious as all hell, and it's got GLAD written all over it, because this stuff, it's like, you have to ask, okay, why are they doing this? This clearly isn't because they care about the kids. Some of the teachers might think they're doing the right thing and they're doing it in the name of the kids, but why is there so much money behind this? Why is there so much legislative gobbledygook written about this? And why is the push so hard? There's nefarious shit going on.
Yeah. So much of it is the money behind it.
It's going to break the healthcare industry. It's going to be one of the many things that ends up, the healthcare industry is going to, it's going to go down in a ball of flames because of this. This is the biggest, like I said previously, this is the biggest child abuse scandal the world has ever seen, by far. And then also mentioning, because you mentioned AB 665, that also is in tandem with Senate Bill 866, allows kids to consent to medical decisions without their parental consent or knowledge. So yeah, these are not one-off bills. That these go hand in hand with other pieces of legislation that's being passed here in California because it's a sanctuary state.
I'm so glad you said that, Paz, because that's just it. So like, these kids we've never seen this before in history ever,
right,
where children who cannot vote, who cannot drink, who cannot drive, young people, children, however you want to label them,
can't get a tattoo.
Yes, they are that can be taken out by laser later on. You can reverse that. So,
right.
So they are given the power to make these medical decisions. You cannot find this written and to back this up in any medical book, psychiatric, and any of it. Medically, this does not exist. Science does not support this. It has never happened before. And as Paula said, this is going to be the biggest child abuse scandal ever, and probably right along with it, one of the biggest human rights violations ever to happen. Once we get past all this, when it's all said and done, and we have an entire generation that are diseased from having wrong sex, cross-sex hormones. I mean, this stuff, that's what is scientific about it, is that we know that these wrong sex, cross-sex hormones cause diseases.
Right. It's going to be looked at like lobotomies, thalidomide, and electroshock therapy. And this is coming on the back of this huge government pharmaceutical push to make everyone take an experimental injection. I don't know how you guys felt about the vaccine. I don't know if you guys took the vaccine, but the fact that it was pushed so hard on everyone, where they went after people's jobs, Gavin Newsom held a freaking lottery for it. They did weed joints for jabs. They did that. Like, it's another inorganic thing, and it's pushed by the same freaking people that want to make tons of money, forcing everybody to take a vaccine. And 85% of Californians took it. And this is coming on the back of that. So the trust in the medical establishment has been crippled. And like, zero freaking trust. I have zero trust in the medical establishment. And it sucks because there's lots of really good doctors out there. There's lots of really good nurses, respiratory therapists, all that stuff. And for the most part, a lot of them that refuse the vaccine, they're not in that career anymore. So it's the damage that's been done to the medical community is, I don't know if it's irreversible, but it's going to take decades to repair that damage. And they're not even done pushing this agenda.
Well, and I think that's when people should take notice, is that when you're pushing it so much to where you're removing parental rights, where you're writing legislation, when you're keeping secrets, when you're indoctrinating and you're taking, puberty blockers, and then, it's like a conveyor belt. Then the next thing is cross-sex hormone. When you're going to that extreme, something isn't right. If it was all good and well, we wouldn't have to write legislation, to keep parents out of the decision making. We wouldn't have to keep secrets. That's what alarms me when there's a push like that to eliminate things like parental rights. It's not good, because no parent who knows what's really good for their child is ever going to keep no decent parent is going to keep their child from that. So the fact that we're removing the parent right there, to me, says, and should say to every parent, this is not right. Something is very wrong.
I mean, like Palace said, it was the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of people. The AB 1955 one, Elon taking his whole, I think he shut it down in San Francisco, and he's talking about moving a lot to Texas.
And that's cool, but the Palace and I, we have this conversation a lot too, that, somebody has to stay and fight. We can't all just run.
Right.
We got to stay and fight, because the kids here need it. The families here need it. And California is just absolutely gorgeous. And before it was, thrown down the shitter by crappy legislation and terrible leadership, this is a great state, and people have to stand up and fight. People have to stay behind. And that's not a dig on Elon. I love the dude. I could see us hanging out, having a great time. I like a lot of what he's about. I rock with him. But, we have to stay and fight, and parents have to stay and fight. And a great example of taking a stand was in Huntington Beach. The mayor there, she proposed an ordinance against AB 1955. She was a little subtle about it. She just, was like, hey, I'm just doing an ordinance. You guys can do what you want with the rest of the state. I'm the mayor here. I'm responsible for my people only, which is fair. And she, proposed this, and it passed. So, there's still steps that it has to go through, but, it gave
Gavin's
people
pissed.
Oh yeah. And it gave people, made people realize, holy shit, it is true what, everybody said in the past and our founding, we do have control at the local level. We just have to stand up and take it back. And this is what that mayor and others now are working to do. And that's where things really start to fall apart, for Newsom, Gruesome, all that. It starts to fall apart with that, because we're taking a stand and we're not running, and we're staying and fighting, and somebody has to do that. Somebody has to fight.
Right. So sorry, I wanted to pivot off of what Samuel was saying here, or add to it. So there's about 977 school districts in California. That's a lot of school districts. And so our strategy, at least, is that any politician or any school district that is fighting this good fight, how we win this war on children, it's going to happen school district by school district, county by county, state by state. That's really how it's done. Yes, 977 school districts, that's a lot of school districts. But the good news is that more and more parents are waking up, and it just takes little bits of opportunity, like what's happening in Huntington Beach and then what's happening in Chino Valley. I don't know if you know about Sonia Shaw and what's going on with the Chino Hills. Oh, the massive lawsuit. Like, this is how AB 1955 kind of blew up, is because Sonia Shaw, who's the president of the Chino Valley Unified School District, they wanted to implement the parental notification policies back in 2023. And Rob Bonta, Attorney General Rob Bonta, was pissed about that. He wanted to go and sue the school district, and then Liberty Justice Center ended up defending the school district against Rob Bonta. And then a couple months later, AB 1955, or a year later, AB 1955 kind of sprouted out of nowhere, seemingly so, but it was a concerted effort to ban those parental notifications. But it takes really strong and really courageous school board members, whether they're presidents or school board members or what have you, to take that stand. And more are going to follow in suit. And I think that's a real miraculous thing to see, because I think people on the outside, when they see California, they say, oh, it's a lost cause, all of this stuff. Right. But at the end of the day, Sammy is right. California is worth fighting for. And I also think at the same time, people are underestimating the people of California. Right. We may be distracted, but we're not stupid. We're constantly on our phones all the time. So more and more people are waking up. I know we had, I don't know if you heard of Protect Kids California. Did you hear anything about that when we were running the ballot initiative? That's another thing that we had a couple months back, was that we wanted to get this ballot initiative, Protect Kids California, on the ballot for November. And we didn't pass, unfortunately. We had about like 450,000, I think it was like 400,000 signatures, and we needed 550,000. So we were close. Grassroots effort that was happening, city by city. But we only had the Protect Kids California initiative. It only had about like $200,000 of investment money to do this grassroots effort. So it did make like a big dent in terms of grassroots efforts. But initially it was about, protecting girls' sports, banning puberty blockers, no secrets for parents, all of that stuff that we're all discussing now. Eventually that's going to get on the ballot, hopefully in 2026. But we tried to push it this year, and people just were still sleeping, unfortunately.
Well, it's a good testament, though, to how the grassroots, and that's what here, whether it was with the mandate stuff, the ability to mobilize here in California and this grassroots movement that you can get going and generate it and really make change. That's the mentality that Californians have, and we will often sometimes, just are told that it's just a bunch of, far this and that and, whatever. But the people in California are aggressive. They will fight. And this Protect Kids California petition was a great example of that. Like, we didn't have all the money, but how quickly everything came together as late as, if that's the right term, as late as it kind of started, only showed us what we can do when we now we're mobilized and we have the time and we know, the how to navigate it. Next time it will be on the ballot for sure. And just the people reaching across the aisles is another thing. We have to work together on this. The whole, we've worked with religious kind of organizations, dad organizations that are just all a bunch of dads. And here I am, the gay guy coming in, I'm like, yeah, what's up? And we have to put all that stuff aside and find this common ground that we have, and that's, Palace and I always say, there's no matter what our org is, or your organization is, when it comes to this issue, there should be no space between us when it comes to safeguarding children, and everybody should be working together.
Well, so Californians have been psyoped into thinking that this is a partisan issue, and it's the whole, people go to work, they got busy lives. So many people don't know what's going on. They don't, a lot of people don't even know about AB 1955. They don't know about how much legislation is actually behind this stuff. So you'll get people saying oh, that's not happening. And it always starts there, where it's the 3-step process, right? It's oh, that's not happening. Oh, it's only happening a little bit. Oh, it's happening, but this is why it's a good thing. This is how it always happens with all of this stuff. And people in California, it's like the racism word. The worst thing that you could throw at a Californian is that you're a conservative. Yeah. And they've been tricked into thinking that, hey, I don't really want that boy naked in the room with my daughter when they're changing for soccer. That now is some far right opinion. It's that's how people have been manipulated into thinking that this is some sort of partisan issue, when it's you're just protecting your kids. This isn't even politics. This is
manipulated is the word, and also distractions. This is what they do. They unpin the grenade, they throw it in, they watch the chaos, everybody scatters and nobody can, regroup. That's what they do when they say things like this, conservative, or homophobic, or, religious. And listen, this is not about that. When it comes to children and safeguarding them, this is not a right, left, gay, straight issue. These are children. These are the most sacred, innocent creatures, on this planet. And to come, and to close ranks to protect them, it's not anything other than protecting the children. It has nothing to do with anything else. Anything that's said otherwise is a distraction, and I just ignore it. I really do. I know it sounds like a little cheap or cheesy, but I don't listen to it. I just say bullshit. That's not what I'm about. And we get called a lot of things. I'm not even gay. I'm a paid straight guy, living with another guy.
But they call that gay for pay.
Yeah, something that's what the hell. But yeah, no, it has nothing to do with that. Those are distractions, and people have to stop listening, have to stop being afraid of being labeled, a conservative, or, a homophobic, to speaking out on safeguarding children. Think about that. You're speaking up on safeguarding children and keeping them innocent and away from harm.
Well, so a lot of it too is the social media aspect. Like I remember the first time I had like something not something go viral, but I got dogpiled. Like the first time I got dogpiled on the internet, it was like, oh my god, what's happening? Everyone hates me, and like that is like the feeling, and it's like it's this huge cause of anxiety. You think about it for the rest of your day, and you get beaten into submission. And it's like once you sort of get past and embrace the these are a bunch of trolls, and I mean a lot of it's fake. It's not even organic,
Bots.
but
Yeah, bots.
bots. Yeah, but even before you realize that, because that sort of comes later, you sort of realize like, oh, these aren't even real people. But before that happens, you think they are real people. But if you just embrace it, you're like, you know what? Like, fuck you, no. Sorry, like, pardon my French, but that was my campaign slogan, by the way, was fuck you, no. Is just once you stand up to everyone, it's like, you know, the meme, the guy that stands up in the theater and says, no, you're all wrong. Like that thing. It's so liberating. And once you just stop caring that a bunch of midwits that really have no clue what's going on, that are, you know, the current thing people, the grayed out NPCs, they're going to attack you. Get over it. That's like, they don't matter. They really don't. This is like an actual fight that's occurring that you need to take place in. And I think a lot of people are starting to say, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care anymore. I'm standing up.
And it's okay to be scared. And I mean, we've been doing this for a while now. I've, you know, gone to this intense, you know, heated board meeting, that one. I hate standing up and speaking to city council and to school boards. It sucks. You know, and I do still sometimes stumble over my words. I do sometimes think, man, who's going to be here? Because we hear, you know, who's going to show up, and then you get there and these people are hackling you as you're talking. You're like, great, going to go out to the parking lot. It's just me. I'm by myself. Like, what's going to, you know, am I going to be the next story? So, you know, it is scary. But then I tell myself, like, it doesn't matter though. Like, even if I stumble over my words, or I don't say the exact thing, or it doesn't come off the way that I wanted to in front of, you know, this panel of, you know, city council members, I'm doing what I can to safeguard children. And it's not always going to be comfortable. I'm not always going to get it right, but I'm out here doing it, you know, and that's something I don't think is talked about enough, is that it is a lot of work, and it can be exhausting, but you have to remember what the goal is, and that's to safeguard these children.
So what got you guys, like, what was your sort of moment where you're like, okay, I got to do something?
Well, it was either this or go back into the closet. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how
Literally.
I would have fared to do that, but it just got to a point, because Gays Against Groomers, like, we've been around for over 2 years now. But I remember when Jamie, she posted on social media, "Hey, I'm starting an organization called Gays Against Groomers." I think this was back in 2022, I think. So I knew about it initially, and I waited the year just to kind of see how it all panned out, because I knew right away that, you know, if I'm going to do this, like, I'm going to do this, like, I'm going to go all the way with it. And so I feel like a lot of people that come into Gays Against Groomers, like, we all have the same kind of mentality when it comes to safeguarding children. A lot of us have that warrior mentality, but a lot of us also feel like we were called to do something like this. You know, it's a very particular line of work, volunteer work. You get a lot of hatred online or for wherever else, but you feel like you're called to do it. And I never feel like I'm in danger. I always feel like I'm safe. But the very incredible, unique thing that I do see when I go and talk to people, or if I go to events or whatever, when I start talking to people individually one-on-one, you can see people have that kind of awakening. Like, it's like at the flick of a switch, where people just have the consensus of like, oh my God, like, this is a very important thing that we're doing. And this is a very different part of history that we're all a part of. And that's a very, very special moment that I think that a lot of us we kind of circle around, and we kind of want to nurture, and we want to make sure that other people are aware that, hey, there's other people in this space that believe in the same things that you do about protecting kids. And, you know, if you're gay or lesbian or trans, and if you don't feel like you have the courage to speak up, you know, kind of sit on it, but eventually you're going to have to take action. And that's what happened to me. So.
Yeah, same. I was like, okay, I can either, first of all, I thought I was the only person in California, at least, that thought the way I thought, and, you know, spoke out the way I did. And, you know, it cost me friends, social groups and whatever. But I thought, you know, the way I think about it is I I can't just sit by and not do anything, because this is going to come back. And as we said, there's going to be human right violations, the child abuse scandal that this will be, in history books. I don't want to be on the wrong side of that. And so I just felt compelled, and also too, to restore the gay community, our name. Like, we're good people. We're just like everybody else. We really are. After we got gay marriage passed, that was our last fight. And that's not a religious thing. That's just because anybody in the United States can get married. We wanted the same right for the tax benefits, yada, 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 the right to see our spouse in the hospital in the event of something, going wrong. But, I saw that this was going to start destroying the gay community or our community, the LGBT, community. And like, I had to do something about it. And I felt super compelled to just get in, and I stumbled across Gays Against Groomers, and it was just a right fit for me.
Michael, do you know anything about SB 1414? It made big news back in July about soliciting. It was a piece of legislation soliciting minors for sex, and it was going to turn it into a felony. So
I got it right here.
Yeah, it's one of those. And the reason why I brought it up is because we blew it up on social media, because there was LGBTQ activists that were sitting in committee and pretty much telling the world, oh, well, this bill, we don't want this bill to be passed because it's going to affect the LGBTQ community. So, which I find particularly insane, because what piece of that legislation affects the LGBT? Yeah, it's offensive. So Sammy and I really strongly feel like this is the hill. Like, we have to set this, or at least at Gays Against Groomers, we're setting this is the line that you do not cross. This is the hill, and we have to speak up for the betterment of our community, because the LGBTQ community, it was never about grooming minors. It was never about kids. It was always about equal rights, as Sammy said. And so we're reaching this point where I don't think that gay people have had to be this courageous in quite a while. It's been decades now. And so I just instantly thought of SB 1414, how those activists, those LGBTQ activists, oh, well, this is going to effectively, this is going to be a negative for the LGBT community. And it's about, you're soliciting minors for sex. Like, that should be a felony. That's highly, highly offensive. It has nothing to do with gay people, and it's just disgusting. So
that's a great example.
SB 145 as well is, I mean, I'm sure that same thing. So Scott Weiner introduced that one, and you kind of chuckle every time you say his name, huh? It's so it's always him. He's always the one introducing this stuff. But existing law, Sex Offender Registration Act, requires a person convicted of one of certain crimes as specified to register to law enforcement as a sex offender while residing in California or while attending school or working in California as specified. A willful failure, blah, blah, blah. So this bill would exempt the mandatory registration under the act a person convicted of certain offenses involving minors if the person is not more than 10 years older than the minor, if that offense is the only one requiring the person to register. So this is referring to anal and oral sex. So in theory, according to this, a 22-year-old could do one of those acts with a 13-year-old, and they don't have to register as a sex offender.
We have a problem in the LGBT community with people posing as us who are actually pedophiles. I'm not pointing out saying who is who. Don't get my words twisted here. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I am just saying that we have a huge problem in our community of LGBTQ people posing as us who are actual pedophiles. And so I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. When you guys are reading these pieces of legislation, do keep in mind that we have a problem here in regards to our community. And that's the whole reason why we're speaking up too as well. People always mention to us, well, why don't you go after the Catholic Church? Why don't you go after priests? Well, this is our backyard. We're dealing with what's happening in our backyard.
Really quick. It's very similar to the autogynephilia thing, because in the trans community, they have men that have infiltrated that community that are not trans. They're straight men that like to dress up like women, and they get off on it. And many of them are predators. And it's the same concept. Sorry,
and we kind of warned a while back, this with organizations like GLAAD and, these other juggernauts that, that there was a slippery slope, and that, people were cautioning back then that, hey, we've got to, sure, we're accepting of different people and religions and all that stuff. I think any decent person is, but we've got to be careful about how we define our community, because there could be a risk, of people posing and, hijacking, or the whole wolf in sheep's clothing, and sadly that is what's happening. And again, so from the outside, people who, like you said a while back, who aren't totally tapped in, they don't understand all this stuff. So they're just seeing it coming from, the community, the old school community, and not realizing that these people do not actually identify as, gay or lesbian or bisexual, that they actually don't, they're not any of these things. They're just coming in because it has to be this all accepting, all inclusive, environment, and which is why their flag keeps changing and adding something new, all the time to it. And that's a really scary thing. And it's, again, back to what I was saying, and Palace mentioned, is part of the mission is restoring our name, and that's something our founder feels very strongly about as well. It's secondary to safeguarding children, but it's a very important mission to us.
I also wanted to point out too, Michael, you should get Adam Vina on your show. I don't know if you guys, the audience, know who is Adam Vina, but Adam Vina would be a very interesting person to talk to in regards to pieces of legislation in relation to the family court system. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but pieces of legislation that have been passed in California in regards to children and gender affirming care, when it's passed through the family court system, what is happening with these judges that are judge activists passing these pieces of legislation, there's also a very alarming thing that's happening too as well. So I just wanted to mention that because Adam Vina has a very interesting background in regards to his case, what's going on with his kids, what had happened to the judge that had to recuse himself because of things that had come up that were LGBTQ related, and there was some kind of activism on his part. It's a very interesting dynamic that's taking place, but it's a corrupt system that we have here in California. And it's not just in our legislature, it's also in our family courts too as well. It's really, really alarming and insidious. So I don't know, I just thought of that. I don't know why.
No, Tracy texted me his number today. I actually asked him because I want to get him on my show, and I haven't talked to him for a bit. I want to see how he's doing. They put him through hell, absolute hell. Yeah. And I think the one you're referring to is AB 957, which I don't even think Gavin Newsom signed, but this was requiring courts to consider a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity or gender expression when making custody and visitation decisions, which is insane because, if a father says, yeah, I don't want my wife dressing my 9-year-old son in dresses and saying he's Susie, like he likes baseball and karate, but, my ex-wife can convince him of anything. And the judge has to take that into consideration. Oh, you're not affirming the child's gender. Mm-hmm. Well, so Gavin Newsom, from my understanding, he actually didn't sign this. He vetoed this. And it wasn't because he was against it. It was because, judges already have to consider that. That's already, that already exists, was his logic behind it. And again, it's like, why? Why are they doing this? This isn't because they're trying to protect kids. There's something else behind it. And these organizations like GLAAD and some of the other ones that you mentioned, and like who's behind them? It's this. I mean, you get to the tinfoily realm where it's like, what is really going on here? Where it's like, this is an attack on the family unit that's coming from like on high. These are very powerful people that are pushing some sort of agenda for some reason, and we don't know why. What is really going on? What are your guys' speculation? What do you think?
I think they're playing the long game. I think that they're playing the long game in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's tremendous money involved in this, even down to, some of what we were talking about, like the residential homes that children can run away to, being a sanctuary state. You're getting more and more government money to run these programs, to have control. The long term, for me personally, is, thinking that if you can indoctrinate these children young and they become wards of the state, whether mentally or physically, you control everything. There is that component to consider, but obviously the money involved and the power involved in it is evident. And again, it goes over in great detail in our book about, what's behind all this, where the money's coming from, how much is being spent. So yeah, that's where I see it. I think I truly believe that they're in the long game. And and they're hoping that we're not going to wait them out, that we're just going to give up.
I wanted to piggyback on what Sammy was saying. It is a form of ideological subversion that's taking place, because it's something that is the long game, essentially, but it's designed to destabilize us as a country, to destabilize Western societies. So far, Canada and the United States, we're allowing all of these things to happen because it's like a conveyor belt. There's so much money to be had by these different kinds of companies that are health related, but they're not really health related. They're pretty much used to sterilize and mutilate children and young people too as well. But it's all just a conveyor belt for these insidious people.
And it's not care. You're giving these powerful hormones to people, these kids that are going to alter their bodies forever. That's not care. That's not affirming. It's absolutely abuse. It's child abuse.
Yeah, and then when it comes to mutilation, I mean, it's the insidious part. I keep saying that word because that's what all of this is. But the one insidious thing behind it is how they say, "Oh, we need to give this child puberty blockers because they will be likely to commit suicide if we don't do this." And then fast forward to when this kid is 20 years old and they either took the puberty blockers and then didn't get the surgery. So if it's a boy, you're going to have this micro penis, and you might at puberty age, you might say, you know what? No, like I was tricked. I want to go through puberty. And then it's like, well, too late. You can't anymore because you consented to this thing. And then there's the even worse thing where children will go through with these surgeries. And we haven't even talked about that, where they are doing these surgeries on minors. And they are going to get to an age and they're doing it in the name of preventing suicide when, I mean, I'm sorry, just looking at this through the lens of, hey, my dick is gone and it happened when I was a kid. And then all of a sudden I'm 20 years old and I'm like, holy crap, what did I do? Well, the thought of ending things might go through my head.
And there's studies out there that show that, this whole idea, first of all, these kids get online, they're being told to go online, they're hearing from their peers who are transitioning, they're being told, hey, you got to tell your doctor that you're thinking about suicide. That's how you're going to get your drugs. And this stuff is happening. And, but some of the studies are showing that suicide rates are after, these kids have done this, even adults and more adults detransition, after it's all been done. So even adults are doing it. And I think one of the other parts here about the conveyor belt was, so there's the social transitioning, that's the name, the pronouns. And then there's the puberty blockers. And what people, I don't really think understand about that is that this isn't like some sort of benign thing that you can do to, and just stop at any time. I mean, you're rewiring or miswiring, whatever the phrase would be, the pituitary chemicals that go to genitals and the fallopian tubes, or the and create people to be able to be fertile one day. It helps with brain development, bone development. I mean, these are critical chemicals that are being blocked. And people, like I said, we hear when we're educating people, we're so surprised to hear that people see it as, something that's benign. Oh, it's just, puberty blockers. Reversible. Once they're over it, they can stop them. No, it's irreversible in most cases. And you're physically stunting people from developing. And then they, for being fertile later on. It's wild.
That was the whole case with Chloe Cole with suing Kaiser Permanente, was that she has lifelong health-threatening injuries from gender-affirming care. And so we are just at the beginning of this. Like, we don't even know the onslaught that's coming. Detransitioners are coming. They're coming in droves. It's not an isolated incident. It is a whole generation of children and young people that are affected by this horrible travesty. It's terrible. Yeah. Heavy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There is going to be a giant wave of these poor kids. Yeah. And I mean, just a few years ago, I started looking into this stuff about Oakland's Children's Hospital, Kaiser, and the Boston Children's Hospital. And I went to their website, and it clearly said on their website, like, no, if you're a 15-year-old girl, we'll give you a mastectomy. Like, what? And then the next time I went back there, that was gone. That wasn't on their website anymore, because they know what they're doing. Like, that's the other, again, that word insidious thing behind it is they know what they're doing. They know that this is wrong. They know that parents aren't going to approve of it. And they know what the potential long-term ramifications could be, but they're still doing it because there's so much money behind it.
So much money behind it.
It's sick. It's freaking sick.
It will destroy the healthcare industry. It will destroy it. We don't know what's going to come after it. And yes, there are good doctors that exist. There's great nurses, but at the end of the day, this is the straw that will break the camel's back. This avalanche of detransitioners. Now, put aside everything that's happening with COVID. This is the biggest child abuse scandal the world has ever seen, and it's going to topple every single healthcare provider, every single healthcare provider that provided gender affirming care to minors.
And doctors are starting to come out finally. People are starting to step out of line and say, you know what, this is not right, because they see what's happening. And one example is Dr. Quentin Van Meter. You guys should people should look him up. He's been in the medical field his whole life, and he talks about these statistics and how none of this is based in science at all. And it's incredible what this man knows and what he's saying and speaking out against. And it's going to be people like him and the others. Like, Pala said, there are great physicians out there. They just have to start speaking up. And a couple of them are going to take hits for it. They're not going to be the ones that, drag us over to victory necessarily, but they're going to be a part of the fight. So I guess, they are in their own way. It's very scary for them, but it's happening. They're coming out.
Pre-COVID, I had a view of doctors as like the angels of society, where so I quit drinking back in 2018, and it was
me too.
Oh,
me too.
High five.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Hey,
so
great.
it was a life changer for me. I started trail running, and my entire life, every aspect of it got better. Every single aspect. 100%. And it was because I had to go to the hospital. I started feeling like a pain in my side, and I thought I was actually having kidney stones again. So I set up a doctor's appointment, and I go there. And it was my new primary care physician who I'd only seen like twice. And she's this old German lady, like old German lady. And she sort of had like a come to Jesus talk with me that wasn't really a medical talk. She didn't need to have that talk with me. But I mean, if I'm going to attribute stopping drinking to any one person, it would be her, because she, like, I used to be an athlete and stuff, and I had just become this drunk, like this slob. And I hated myself. And she like saw that like immediately. She was like, what are you doing? Like, you could easily stop drinking. It's just stop drinking. What the problem was, my liver was swollen. I was feeling so much pain because my liver was literally swollen, and it was like pushing on all my intestines. And I even left there, and I wanted to go buy a bottle of alcohol. Like, I had to leave early from work, go to the doctor, and I wanted to go buy a bottle of freaking Jameson. That's what I drank. Ooh. I never drank again. I haven't drank since that day. And, that's how I viewed doctors. And then COVID happened, and now this is happening. And I am looking at, almost the majority, because if you're not speaking out against it, you're sort of complicit at this point.
Oh, sure.
And I have the complete opposite view of doctors now. Obviously not all, but how can you just stand by and let this happen? How are you not speaking up? How the hell do you sleep at night? And it's disappointing. And the teachers too. It's the same thing with the school community, the mandated reporters. These are the people we're supposed to be able to trust. The people that kids are supposed to be able to trust. Like, who do kids turn to now? Kids are so freaking screwed. I feel so terrible for kids, what they've been put through the last 4 years, and how they just don't have somebody that they can go to and just be like, everything's fucked. I'm terrified. What do I do? And it's like, well, maybe you should cut your dick off. Like, it's everything that's happening right now is, I feel terrible for this generation, and we got to turn the ship around.
I think that we are.
Yeah, we are definitely, with stuff like this, with the work you're doing, getting the message out there, parents, becoming aware of these things. And, that's a big part of it too, is parents. They play such a critical role in this. And, and it's so easy too. They don't have to get involved with an organization. Just get involved with your kid's school, tap in, see what's happening week by week. Teach your kids to be vigilant. We do it with stranger danger. We do it with crossing the street. Teach your kids to be vigilant in school. Hey, mom, dad, grandma, I learned this today. what do you think about this? Like, talk to your kids, have these conversations, teach them to be as alert as you would if they were walking down the city street. Because now the danger is, in these institutions that we once trusted. And same thing with the doctor. You're going to the doctor. If they're old enough to be in the room with the doctor by themselves, have them be vigilant. It's just teaching your kids to be aware of stranger danger, but just on a broader scale, tapping in with your schools, the material that they're being taught. What is it? Do you agree with it? Because you have the option to opt out. Remember, the 14th Amendment, the parent has the option. People have this idea that school, is this institution that you can't push back on. Public school doesn't mean that they get to control the public. Public school means that you have access to education. The public has access to education. That's it. These people go home off their boards and out of their classroom and live normal lives. They're strangers to most people in the grocery store. These people do not have the authority over your family and certainly not your children. And that's something that parents really need to start understanding, because we look at schools. I know I got intimidated first going in. These school boards, like they rule everything. They don't. They do not have the power. Only what you lend them for the time that your child is there. And even that is very scripted. It's very limited. And if you give them the power, I can't do anything. It's the school board. That means nothing. They have no power over your children. Their power doesn't outrank yours.
Well, there was something that Lance Christensen said from the California Policy Center. Really great people, by the way.
Awesome people.
Yeah, awesome people. But he pretty much nailed it right. Sammy too as well. It's like public schools, like they're meant to support you as the parent and the education of your child. It's not meant to subvert your authority. 100%.
Keep giving all these Yuri Bezmenov references, and I dig it.
Yeah, ideological subversion. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's great. But yeah, I mean that's 100% what that is, and we have to. I would encourage parents to be constantly mindful of that. That they're not there to subvert your way of doing things. They're there initially to support you in educating your children and to be vigilant. Exactly the same sentiments that Sammy mentioned. So.
Words cannot express how happy I am and how thankful I am of individuals like you two and your entire organization for fighting this good fight. And we were offline when we were talking about it, and, about people are saying, oh, you're so brave. And, you think that you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot more than you think you're doing, and standing up and encouraging other people to stand up and, gays against groomers. You like you said, Sammy, you've lost a lot of friends over this. You've had to speak out against things that people in your own community are going to ostracize you for. And that's scary. That's hard to do, and that's the sign of, it really is. It's a sign of a hero. So you guys are heroes. I love what you're doing. Gays Against Groomers is a fantastic organization. If it wasn't for you guys, people may not be standing up. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. Thank you for coming on the show. You guys got a book. Tell me about your book really quick.
So it's the go ahead, Palace. So it's
no.
The Gender Trap.
I'll hold it up.
And so this is for parents who have a son or daughter that is questioning their identity, for people who are maybe questioning their identity and don't really know where to map things out, as we talked, this whole thing about how confusing it is. People that just want to educate themselves on the issue. This book has everything, and it goes into great detail. The reference pages, it's like over 36 pages of just our references and the research that we've done for this book. It's absolutely incredible. And it's an encyclopedia for everything that we covered today. And it literally, there's nobody that it cannot help, for sure. And gaysagainstgroomers.com, this is really something that will really be a roadmap and like I said, an encyclopedia of types for this topic and the other ones we discussed here.
Yeah. And if you guys are interested in ordering it, like Sammy said, gaysagainstgroomers.com, or you can go to the book's website, thegendertrap.com. So at the moment, we're just mailing in the United States, but eventually we're going to be mailing abroad. So a lot of people abroad were asking us, oh, how can I order from England? How can I order from Canada? Sit tight. We're working on it. But as of now, United States only. Go to thegendertrap.com and it's ready to order whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, dude. And thanks to all your listeners, man. What an honor to be here.
Truly.
All right. I spelled it wrong. I tried to type it on. The Gender Trap. thegendertrap.com, gaysagainstgroomers.com. That's where people could find you. What are your socials really quick so people could follow you?
At Palace_Leavitt.
Sammy?
So mine's I'm just really, I just operate off of our Gays Against Groomers California. I'm not really big on the social media. I'm the behind the scenes guy, making connections, but
he's downplaying his role. He's downplaying it. He's a huge
I know. I mean,
integral part of California's Gays Against Groomers.
But I love getting emails. You can find us there on that website and how to reach out to us. Send us everything. That's what I look through. That's my go-to for sure. Send us information on our Instagram or email me if there's anything that we can help with or might be able to collaborate with for sure.
I love it. You guys are fantastic. So sorry, chat. There's a lot of you in the chat tonight. Holly Dath, Holly D. Hath, Casey Martin, Cinemy, Northside. Cinemy had a question for you. I couldn't get to it. Massey Sieb, Casey Martin, Iron Ronin, Jack Downing, Matty Bracco, Scampy, Coco, Wally World, all you guys. Lonnie, good to see you. Thank you so much for being in the chat. You guys didn't know this, but I always like to end the show on a good note, a happy note, a funny note. So I got to tell a joke from the greatest book ever written, The Truth About Chuck Norris. All right. So before we end the show, I'll tell a quick joke. I don't know if it'll be good or not. You guys hang tight after I end the stream. Just want to say bye to you. So pick up a random one and hopefully it's good. All right. Here, random Chuck Norris joke of the evening. A good way to tell if you're about to be attacked by Chuck Norris is if you notice the music becoming more intense. You might also see ninjas scoping you out from behind the trees and on roofs. Death is certain at this point. And on that note, stay CaliBased.